Hi everyone, I'm here with Chander Dhall at Codecamp, and Chander just finished a session. You finished a session on scaling web application, which is a common concern for architects nowadays. Maybe we can speak a bit about
Oh yeah.
how it went.
So really my work has been in scaling applications that have billions of hits a day, and that's a challenge because it's not only about scaling, but it's also the performance that goes in behind it, and then it's not just the database, it's the APIs, the load balancers, the caching piece, the NoSQL part, the offline processing. There's so much stuff that gets into even creating a system like that, and then making sure your performance is good. Not just regular code, but code that actually works at the same time scales and performs well. And it is a challenge, right? When I go to a training, it's like a 5-day training just to get through the concepts of it. And by the time you're making this thing work, it's like 6 to 10 months worth of effort, especially if it has gone south. That's a big problem. So
Right, 'cause I was into your session as well because I heard everybody laughing and went to check it out. And what I got there is if you make the wrong decisions in terms of scalability, you can actually affect performance and get poor response times.
Oh, big time. I tell people, right, so if you bring us in for the first 5 days, that's awesome. But if you bring us in after 2 years, well, that's great because now we're going to make a lot more money fixing all those things, right? So that's why everyone's laughing in there. We're having fun with this talk.
We went through several steps and there were a lot of, you can end up with hybrid scenarios. But for, let's say, normal or up to mid-size applications, are there any quick gains, or what do you suggest looking at first?
Well, so if you have a mid-sized application, all I try to tell people is that whatever you choose, make sure that it is something that you can scale later. So let's say you choose a database for NoSQL, right? Make sure that is something that gets you things that you may think of today, but also want few years later. Let's say you want something, which is your search server. Now when you're searching and you have a search server that gives you searching capabilities but doesn't really have boosting capabilities, or it doesn't really have good ways to get into a recommendation engine, well, that's something you might need 2 years later. You can't rewrite that whole thing, right? So focus on what you're picking now and then slowly build upon it. But when you're making decisions on something like a sticky session, well, that's a bad thing. So if you put it in code once, you're gonna have to rip it off. If you really have to put it, use dependency injection or something else that you can later rip it off. At least that's the bare minimum. But also understand the hardware, because developers have this tendency to write everything in code. They pick the technology, they get excited about it, but what they don't do is make sure that it's working the way they claim it to be working. Because most of the times there are big claims in the industry on some very famous frameworks, but they don't do what they actually proclaim themselves to be doing, right?
Yeah, well, really insightful. And also, last but not least, how did you feel at Codecamp?
Oh, I think it's phenomenal. I did not even expect it to be that amazing. I think, you organize things very well. I could tell this is 10 years into it because you're doing it. My gosh, the dinner last night was one of the best dinners I've ever had. We went for like 3-4 hours. I could not even tell.
Romanians eat a lot, I can tell you that.
And I had slept for just 2 hours and I enjoyed it. Imagine I had not slept, I would have loved it. And not just that, people are so good. Everyone's smiling, they're laid back, and they're very, very actually passionate about technology, which to me is amazing. And by the way, I really like the ice creams.
Thanks a lot, Chander.
Thank you so much.
And hope to have you here soon.
Definitely.